Welcome to Back in the Box.
Your weekly dose of discussions and stories shared about how we felt we were kept in certain boxes in our lives by a society of close family members who expected us to sit in a box and stay in it. In our podcast, we aim to lift the lid on all the times we try to break out of the boxes.
I'm Em.
And I'm Z.
We are both British South Asian women and are lifting the lid on all of our personal experiences and doing so as two friends having a lighthearted conversation. And through healing, we're now in a position to be able to talk openly and vulnerably in the hope that you may also be able to resonate with our experiences.
Join us to lift the lid on that box.
This episode, we will be discussing boxes around parenting teenagers. And this, in many ways, has been, for me personally, one of the most challenging times, where you have children who are no longer young and dependent. They're now influenced more by outside influences, such as peers, social media, away from that bubble we created in our home. They are broadening and exploring beyond the boundaries of childhood to discover themselves, but also have their physical and emotional changes going on through adolescence, puberty, and also hormonally. And we are going to cover our experiences over this and the next episode, as there are so many.
So let's dive in and explore what boxes we faced around this as parents. Were there any boxes that you were putting in place or had to break out of during your children's teenage years?
Yeah, I think for me, it was really hard to adjust to the fact that I didn't have as much influence on their lives and know as much about what was going on when they moved to secondary school. In primary school, we're there, we can check in with them, we can interact with teachers. Children are more open about what they're doing. So I guess it was feeling like, yes, I have that control, but actually when they go to secondary school, it was the lack of control that I guess I needed physically and emotionally, being able to keep them safe and protected, which I could at primary school, but we can't as much when they go to secondary school. So a bit of a conflict in myself about the fact that I really wanted them to have that independence to grow and flourish. I think the only time I would really say that I had any interactions with the teachers, this one example that I can remember is when the music teacher was trying to force them to sing and perform only through school and give up their private lessons in piano and singing, because according to him was not a priority and he didn't support the school. And he was trying to force them into that box of, you belong to this school, so you're doing what the school wants and that is your priority. And to me, that sounded like limiting their opportunities for his own interest and, to make his music department look good. And that for me was just not going to happen. And it didn't happen. I went in there, big guns blazing like Lara Croft. You are not doing this. As you know, I've always wanted my children to have as many opportunities as possible, and definitely opportunities that I didn't have when I was younger, or my parents could afford. We always want to try and do something better for our children, don't we? They had singing and piano lessons as they enjoyed music, and that stayed in place. So yeah, he did not get his way with that one. But apart from that, I didn't really have many interactions. I literally dropped the children off at school and picked them up, and that was my interaction with school from secondary through to sixth form. What was your involvement with secondary school like, Z?
Yeah, I mean, my involvement in school, wasn't expecting to be involved the way I was, but we'll get on to that.
Right.
But I was quite pleased not to get involved with the mums in playgrounds. So dropping them off and picking them up was fine. I quite liked that kind of like high level, low touch points, basically. And to be honest with you, because I had like a 5.5-year gap between each of them, I had that one-to-one time with them in the car. So, my son, obviously being a boy, wouldn't hardly say anything. It was like one-word answers. Okay, yes, fine. That's all I would get. But over time, he would confine a lot more than I would get if I was in the house. So I quite like that one-to-one time with them in the car. But even when I sailed through senior school with no trouble, you know, he was like the perfect student, where the teachers were all quite positive with every interaction with him. Whereas my daughter, that was flipped on its head. Her interactions were consequences that she received for bad behaviour. She actually ranked up as the most consequences as a student received in the whole school. It was like a new record.
Wow, Guinness Book of Records, famous for her.
I did not want that fame.
I bet you did.
That was a record I did not want.
Absolutely.
So my interactions were probably more involved in like parent circle meetings, is have like a little forum parents that get together to really understand how we can counter any disruptive behaviour. So I don't think they were actually aware that I was the parent of one of the disruptive students. And I was just like that moral in that forum, to be fair. So, you know, they would actually talk about what can we do about these kids that are disrupting. I mean, when I sat in those meetings, I felt constrained.
Right.
It was so restrictive. The schooling system and their thoughts were quite rigid and quite set. And it was all centred about being perfect. It was all centred about being so institutionalised, I felt. That 1 hour meeting made me feel like I was suffocating.
So you and her felt like you were in a box.
Yeah, we put her in there because it was a single-sex school. We lived in quite a good area, and so there wasn't that many bad state schools. There were some that kind of, I felt she would get influenced quicker if she went to a mixed state school.
Did you choose a single-sex school really because of the behaviour that you'd heard about in other schools, and you thought this one might be a little bit different?
Yeah, absolutely. They had low tolerance for disruptive behaviour. I did not realise that my daughter was that disruptive behaviour kid. So
said.
It was restrictive in its mindset. I just didn't feel like creativity was encouraged apart from like, you know, drama or singing. It was more concerned about reputation, upholding the outstanding status that they had, basically.
Right.
Yeah, which is fair enough, but, you know, there are goals for that. You know, there's things put in place to actually achieve that status, basically. So it was an eye-opener for me attending those circle meetings and forums and kind of like understand and empathise with my daughter because she wasn't one for rules or too much structure. We didn't really have a lot of structure at home. We didn't really have rules, like I've said before. She played out as a result. She also got picked on by the teachers because she was disruptive, but she was part of a peer that were also disruptive. But because she was the minority in terms of diversity, the rest of the girls were all white, basically, she would get punished over and above them.
So do you think that this was based on her colour or perception, reputation she had built with the behaviour incidents?
I think the reputation played a part. I think it was more like a self-fulfilling prophecy in regards to, we know you're bad, you are going to be bad, but kind of did play a part. I was quite heavy in regards to fairness. And, you know, I would get straight up to school and have an investigation to be undertaken of the conduct of a particular teacher who would call her out every time. It was successful in the sense it was deemed to be practicing unfair treatment towards my daughter.
Love that for you, for fighting for the justice for your daughter. And, you know, through that, she could see that it was important to stand up for yourself like that as well. You've been that role model for her.
Yeah, there is that. I mean, I wasn't blind to the fact that she had bad behaviours. I could actually see that she was quite a naughty kid sometimes. But, you know, there were times that would be a bit too harsh on her. But I would go into meetings with the teachers and agree that she goes on report for a whole week. Get her to sit in front of the class, force her to actually ask questions, just so that she understands that she needs to be learning. So I would get them to implement stricter guidelines to make sure that she is abiding. You know, it was a funny thing because COVID kind of happened after a couple of years of her being disrupted, and she really settled.
Wow.
And we found that she really missed being at home. And she really missed that belonging of all of us being at home. Because you may recall prior to her joining senior school, we used to be at home together all the time because, I was self-employed. A couple of years before she started senior school, that we all went and started working. And that disrupted her and she didn't really enjoy that. So she played out quite a lot of her bad behaviours.
Right.
I think it was linked to a bit of loneliness. I have to admit, after COVID, that was heading towards the end of her senior school. The teacher really wanted her.
Right.
They really wanted my daughter. The head teacher invited for tea and biscuit.
Ooh, brownie
So
points.
it was literally a turnaround. It's literally a
That's
turnaround.
amazing.
Yeah, it was really. They even gave her permission to stay in the college, even though she didn't have the grades, because normally they would turn students away if they didn't
Yeah.
actually make the grades, but they were making an exception for her to stay on, but she couldn't reject them. Much to my annoyance, I was like, "Get in that college. It's a really good college. Get in there." She was like, "No, I don't want to go
But
there."
isn't that wonderful that once she settled, she was thriving and the acknowledgement from the college that they could see that huge change in her behaviour, which is fantastic for her self-esteem. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah, I think teachers play a big part in terms of kids' confidence, particularly if they're negative towards a child and constantly negative. It does create a bit of self-fulfilling prophecy in that child, and it gets ingrained into them believing that they'll always be naughty and they'll never be any good. So I think, the fact that she turned around and then their attitudes turned around, I think that's a really positive experience.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely. But, in terms of studies, did you get involved in their studies?
I did it at primary school, like doing projects with them and all that sort of thing. But when it came to secondary school, they really had more independence in terms of studying and homework. It was really down to them to organise themselves and do that independently. I didn't really want to be going, well, have you done it? Have you done it?
Yeah.
I wanted to create that independence and that motivation that they wanted to do it. And I worked long hours, and actually they went to homework club and they liked to complete the homework there because when they came home, actually would be doing other things. They might have other clubs that they were going to go to, and they just wanted to have everything done before they got home so they could relax and we could just chill. So they were very organised. The only time I really got involved with their studies was when they asked me for help, and then I would help them. But other than that, I would check that they'd done the work and encourage them to work hard and do their best and then sign their diaries. They had a mindset, and I think this was really around the peer group that they hung around with who wanted to study and do well with their studies. So that's influenced them to focus on it. But I also was very aware that I did not want them to feel pressure that they as a person were being thought about just based on what they achieved academically. So that for me was a really big thing. But they also knew that education is going to help them. So I did use the phrase, education is your knowledge that no one can take away from you. And it can help you with your future choices and also provide flexibility. And they just, went with it, and they did really well on their own. They were motivated to study. They organised themselves to study. They wanted to study further, and they both went on to university in terms of studying and homework. To be honest, I don't think I could have done the work with them anyway in terms of what they were learning. But one of the things that did influence them, like I said, was the peer group. And actually, that became even more of an influence when children started to have mobile phones, and it was becoming a bit of a trend in that time period that teenagers had mobile phones and they were texting each other, we're using all of the different social media platforms. But I remember I was really strict on this. So I probably did keep them in a bit of a box about that they were only allowed to join it when they were at the correct age, which was the permitted age for those particular apps. And then because I was thinking about safeguarding and internet safety, it was a very open system where they shared their passwords. They knew that I could go on at any point and check, which I didn't really because I don't really want to check, but they thought that I might do. And we also had quite long chats about internet safety and who they should be or could talk to keep themselves safe. What about you, Z?
I think like you on the primary school side, I got involved as much as I could. I'd be like one of those parents that would actually, when they sort of say, oh, there's a project where I'd be like, okay,
Yeah.
let's do this. But as opposed to let's do this, it's like, let me do this. So,
Oh, I think I did that as well. Anything creative, building rainforests,
know-
building volcanoes. I was
no,
there.
volcano. That was like the best project
Yeah.
ever.
I enjoyed
To get
that.
I loved it. I loved it.
I think
That
we
was my
enjoyed
best
it
work.
more than the kids.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. So I also kind of like invested in private tutoring, even in primary years. I
Okay.
was sort of saying, because my son, because there was a real thing in the school where we were at, where you had grammar schools. So I wasn't interested in private schooling. Actually, it wasn't something that was on my radar, even though there was a lot of peer pressure from mothers that I had befriended whose kids went to private schooling. I was just like, well, you're going to miss out if your kids go to private school. Oh my God, do you not know they would have no connections?
Gosh.
Do you know how important connections are? And I was like, I don't really go through it. I don't care. They're not going to private schooling. There's good enough state schools that they can go to. But I did start private tutoring for my son because of that pressure to get to grad school. So there was the SATs exams, the 11 plus exams.
Yes.
But you got to remember, some of these mums, they knew about this way before. Either they had sibling roles, so quite a lot of his class would go in there as a sibling role, so they got immediate admission, and a couple of them had been training their kids since they were 5 or 6.
Oh my gosh, that's
for
a
these
lot
exams.
of pressure on children, in my opinion.
It's a lot. Yeah, but it was kind of the norm. It's kind
Right.
of the norm. It's just like you get them into music. That's one way to get them in. Sort of thing. They're learning, like if you've got kind of like playing piano at 5, 6 for no reason. They're playing piano at 5, 6, so they need to get to that school. So I found this tutor, this maths tutor, because we're focused on maths, because it's like verbal reasoning, logical reasoning, and maths has been the key things basically. And her name was Lakshmi.
What, like the goddess?
More like the demon. She was the demon.
Oh gosh.
No lie. She was good. So then, but she was a tutor demon. And what I mean by that is that she would be so hardcore on my son. Like if he didn't get a certain maths equation or didn't get like 100% on his papers, she'd be like, oh my gosh, do you not know if you do not pass this exam? Bearing in mind, he's only like 10,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
If you do not pass this exam, you won't get to that grammar school. If you don't get to that grammar school, you won't go to the university you need to get to. If you don't get to the university, you won't get the job. If you don't get that job, you won't get that house. If you don't get that house, your life is over. You're a loser. And she's saying this without any knowledge to me. And my son would come down and was in like tears. And like, Lakshmi just said I'm going to be a loser.
Gosh, that's emotionally abusing him.
Literally, and I was just like, don't believe her. I was like, Lakshmi is a certain type of woman. You do not believe anything she says. So Lakshmi got her son into a very good grammar school. Yeah, obviously. It's that blinkered vision. That is the only way to succeed in life. If you have X, Y, Z, and a total roadmap planned for your kids.
And put the fear of God into them.
100%, it's either you do not stray from this path. And I was just like, no, we're just getting this to see if you get into the school. If you don't get into the school, hey, go, and you'll make new friends. That's just the way it is. There's no pressure. I have to admit, I'm not sure I would have done that again. Looking back, I probably wouldn't have got him to go through the SATs because, why?
Yeah.
I was just being influenced by the mums at the time to say this is the right thing to do. And I think you do get influenced by that a lot.
Of course, when you're seeing that
there's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, of course.
There's a lot of pressure, and you want to do the best with your kids. Like, oh, that's the best thing to do. Oh my God, we've got to go into the SATs. Oh, we've got to do this. Is that little bit of fear, if I'm going to be honest with you.
Yeah.
So I think Lakshmi really put them off for life.
Wow.
So I was just like, let's get personal tutors for secondary. And he was like, no, I think it's cheating. And, I don't need private tutors. If I know it, I know it. If I don't know it, so be it. I was like, what are you talking about? It's like every kid in your school has got a private tutor, and they will have private tutors up until they get to university. How do you think they're getting that A-star grade? So then he was like, I don't care. So he carried a moral torch. My daughter, on the other hand, she wasn't interested in studies whatsoever. But I tried to push her, and I tried that education is key. And she was like, that's a whole lot of rubbish. I don't believe you. So she did not care what I said. She didn't take on anything I said. Didn't believe a word I said to her about life. She was like, nah, I don't believe you. She would test my patience a lot, even though I tried to help her with studies. I found that I had no patience and I was a really bad teacher. Like I would lose my temper at her and she'd be like, "You're not a good teacher." I was like, "No, I'm not a good teacher. Oh my God, because you can't be taught. You cannot be." Like I was the worst. Like I
I
should
think
not have
as
even got there.
parents, that's probably why people get you, because we can get quite emotional when it comes to our own children, whereas like you're a
I
bit
was,
more,
yeah,
removed from that.
yeah. I was slowly becoming Lakshmi number 2, let's put it that way. But that didn't stop me from instructing other tutors. I tried so many different methods in terms of getting private tutors for my daughter. I was like, "You will learn. I know you will learn.
Oh,
You're the smartest girl. We just need to unleash your potential. Let me try to unleash your potential."
yeah.
So, the private tutors range from groups to individuals to online to home, one-to-ones, to be get a young tutor, to be get an older tutor.
Wow.
I spent
I
thousands.
mean, you did the whole shebang.
I did the whole shebang. I was like,
Wow.
okay, if that doesn't work, there's going to be another way. If it doesn't work, there's going to be another way. There's got to be someone out there, who can inspire my daughter.
Yeah.
With tutoring, it's one of those, like, it's not about the lesson. It's about what you do after the lesson and
Yeah.
how you apply and execute that knowledge. As soon as the lesson finished, she didn't care. She was like, "I'm not doing any of this." And she went off and started watching YouTube or doing her own thing. So she never really learnt anything. So I gave up
Yeah.
after
It's
senior
money down the
years.
drain, isn't it?
It was
If,
literally
yeah.
money down the
Yeah.
drain. To be honest with you, I remember there was a teacher at the school, and I did get really angry with one of the teachers who was like a maths teacher. And it was like, if your daughter doesn't want to learn, you can't motivate her. And I remember thinking, what do you mean you can't motivate her? You're a teacher. You're supposed to be motivating her. You need to find creative ways to motivate her. It's your job to motivate her. She was like, "No,
Yeah.
if your daughter doesn't want to listen, and she doesn't want to learn, you cannot motivate." And at the time, I was like, what is she going on about?
Mm.
Is this not her job? So then, so I
It
then
was all
learned
the
the hard
teacher's
way.
fault at that point in time.
It was, this
Yeah.
woman, she didn't know how to teach.
Wow.
That's what I
She
thought.
didn't know anything,
Uh,
did she? But why was
no,
it that she wasn't motivated to study?
I think she was really into YouTube and YouTubers, influencers. It's another world that she really enjoyed. And you got to remember, a lot of these influencers are very open about the fact that they didn't finish college. Education is not the only way into a career.
Yeah.
The traditional career doesn't mean anything.
She's
Or
hearing
how-
all of these messages, isn't she? That actually it doesn't matter if you don't study, you can still be really successful and earn loads of money.
Yeah, it challenged my way of thinking, because remember, like every single member of my family, apart from my sister, all went to university. My dad ruled it into us, like education is the key, like your mum did. So for me, it was alien for you not to go to university. It's alien for you not to be academically minded. But she challenged me to say, no, there's another way.
Yeah.
There's another life. You can go through life without that. So yeah, it was very different.
You were talking about YouTubers and influencers. So how was it like for you, Z, when your children had social media and mobile phones?
Yeah, it was different for each, and both my children are very different. So for my son, he wasn't interested in social media. He was a gamer. He liked tinkering with computers and wasn't really interested in getting into social media. Even on like the mobile, he wouldn't use any acronyms like IDK, TY, or anything. He'll actually spell it out like, "Thank you." I don't know. I'd be like, "Oh my gosh, thank God for that," because I don't even know what these acronyms mean. There was one like FFS for the hours I spent. What does that mean? And it went over in my head and I had a light bulb moment when I was in bed. I was like, "Oh my gosh, that's a swear word."
We're out of it, aren't we, as we get
I
older?
was totally out of it.
Yeah, the
I was
lingo
totally out of it.
changes.
Literally. But my daughter took to it like duck to water. Yeah, if I'm completely honest. And it allowed her to connect with people that were not in her vicinity. So, traditionally, you go to a school, you just make friends in that school and that's it. You don't go to the next school. But she would actually make friends with kids that were not in the same school, not even in the same town. She would actually broaden her friendships and connect with people that she didn't know.
Yeah. And how did you
And we
feel
didn't know.
about that? Because they could have been potentially strangers or predators. So how did you keep her safe and what did you put in place?
I think for the friends, she would actually meet with friends, so there would be a group sort of thing. I think there would be group chats, I believe, or rooms.
Yeah.
It'd be FaceTiming, so they would actually see. So it wouldn't be invisible, as it were.
Okay.
But then I did put into place where their posts. So for me, it was like, you've got teenage girl posting, and I was very, very conscious about what she was posting and the impact of that. So any post that she would put up, because remember at the time it was all about followers, like the number of followers. If you've got the most number of followers, it's like, oh my God, I must be
Yeah.
really popular.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that
Yeah.
sort of drove like the social media. So for me, it was having a number of chats to sort of say, look, I am, for both of them, I said, I'm not going to track you. I'm not going to follow you. I am not going to be on any of your posts. I will not see it. But that comes with a level of trust, and you need to respect that. So, there'll be times when my daughter would change her password too many times, and it would get an alert on my husband's phone. That's the only way we would know that something was going on.
Right.
And then we will be like, what's going on here? And I would always have talks with her to sort of say, like, with the amount of followers you're having on that post, would you invite them into your bedroom?
Mm.
Would you invite all those people in your bedroom to watch what you're wearing or do what you're doing? Bearing in mind that those people without a face or you don't know could actually be a grown man.
Yeah. Yeah.
So creating those visuals created a little bit of fear, but also made her think about, okay, who am I? It's not about number of followers. It's about who do I know and how they're connected to people that I do know. So, that's where I kind of loosely put the parameters about the safety without being too heavy-handed.
Yeah.
So, social media aside, what was your experience on teenagers drinking?
I think to talk about really how I approach that with my children, I need to talk about my experience with drinking. So really, for me, drinking was very taboo for girls, and in the culture, only men did it. And if a woman was seen to be drinking or lo and behold drunk, as she was thought to be a bit of a low life and an outcast in the Indian community, and women were never to be drunk was the cultural box that I came from. So I never experienced having any alcohol until I went to university. And then, I just went totally wild with drinking when I went there. I know that I'm not the only one of my friends who just thought, right, let's rip loose and do what we're not allowed to do at home,
Yeah.
So, I must have gone out drinking and got drunk regularly on a weekly basis. We went to the student union and had like 50p pound drinks, and it was a good laugh and some really bad hangovers, plus a few funny stories to tell, but we won't go into those.
We won't go into that, no.
I would say that I didn't want that same experience for my children before they went on to further education or left home. And I didn't want it to be a really big taboo thing to drink. And so I wanted to normalize it a little bit for them. So that was the thinking behind, how I approach things with my children and them drinking, because I wanted them to break out of that box of drinking being taboo. So they both had a chance to experience drinking at home, even getting a bit tipsy, as I wanted them to experience it with me in a safe place, so it didn't become a taboo topic. So probably when they were about 16, they tried alcohol, what I used to call fat frogs, which is a mixture of WKD Blue, Smirnoff Ice and Orange Bacardi Breezes. And they used to have a sherbet taste to it, and it was green, hence why the frog part comes in. But a bit like Alco Pop, so it didn't taste like alcohol. So when it was Christmas, they might have a glass, and when it was New Year, they might have one. So it didn't become a big deal to them. Yeah, they got a feeling of what it might be like to have alcohol. They preferred to go to house parties when they were able to drink at 18, rather than to clubs or round friends' houses. They would openly share that they would be drinking. And I felt that they would be safer because their parents would be there. And if their friends came round here and they might have a few drinks, I was here as well. So I knew that they wouldn't be out somewhere at a club with strangers around them. So I felt okay with them doing this. So I used to drop them off and pick them up. And there were times where they were very drunk in the car, when they keep repeating the same thing. Mom, do you love me? And yes, there were times when they were sick. I don't do sick very well. But the next day, there were a few times where they had hangovers, but then they knew what it felt like. And to be honest, it put them off binge drinking. It sort of put them off being drunk. They'd have a few drinks, but even now, they're not really that much into drinking. They didn't really want to experience having hangovers. But the ex-husband, his drinking had also put us all off from drinking to that extent, because we'd felt the repercussions of his drinking in many ways. And it was definitely not something anyone wanted to like or experience with one another. So what was it like for you, Z?
Well, to be honest, I wasn't really a fan of kids drinking at all. So my daughter, she played out. She went against all my expectations and values. I said to her, like, you won't be drinking, you won't be touching this. But I remember when she started senior school, she hung around with popular girls who were quite wild, let's put it that way. You know, they would go drinking, they would go out to clubs. At 13, 14, they were drinking bottles or whatever, cheap rubbish, but high percentage alcohol. I remember one time, one of them actually got unconscious and an ambulance had to be called out, which she had to get hospitalised. I think that's kind of scared my daughter a little bit. But, you know, it involved me stalking my daughter. You know, I could hear it in her voice when I sort of ask her where she is. She tells me she's somewhere. I'm like, nah, you're lying. So it was like that mother instinct, that spidey sense. You're like, nah, don't believe you. So I would drive around there, get round to that mum's house. I'm like, where's my daughter? She's like, and then sort of say that she's at someone else's house. And I'd be like, right, okay. And that same mum would actually ring the other mum's house or warn their daughter, say, hey.
Oh my gosh.
You're like, she's coming round. So and he'd be like, you're damn right I'm coming around. I'm going to come around there quick time. So
the police coming round.
This is SASD.
Exactly.
Not bloody, not normal Bobby on the walk.
Exactly.
So
this is a woman with a mission.
This is a mother on a mission, you know.
How did your daughter respond to that?
Not very well. I'd be that embarrassing mum. I find out that she would be in this club. And this would be on a Sunday, you know. Who goes to a club on a Sunday? Well, teenagers do, obviously, not, you know, old people like me. But, you know, I'd be slouching on the sofa on a Sunday, makeup free, and I get this call, and I'd be like, what the hell is she doing in that club? Knowing that there'd be like 20-year-olds in there. It's like 20-year-old boys with like 14-year-old girls is not a mix.
And everybody drinking potentially, yeah.
Yeah, potentially. Yeah. And they would actually have some social media influencer that would come that would like really attract them. And these influencers are in their mid-20s. They're grown men. Yeah. It's like, no, I don't feel comfortable with that. So I would get my car, drive down to that club, get past the bouncer. I was like, I'm here to get my daughter out. I did that 3 times. You know, called, 3 separate occasions. Yeah. I would drag her out the club. But I was quite a shouty mum. You know, I was very quite authoritative. You know, you would do what I tell you. That didn't land very well. She was very opinionated. And, you know, it was just very much, we would just clash loads. She would just go against my values. There'd be times that she would push me, I would push her. You know, it just wasn't a very nice interaction at all. There was a lot of negativity. It was draining and affected me mentally.
Being able to come to a compromise or a way forward at that point.
Yeah. And they were like minor arguments. They were like proper heated arguments, you know, it's like real shouty arguments. And I wasn't really used to that. I never had any shouty arguments with my son, never shouted at him, never doing this. And all of a sudden I was having these shouty, continuous, aggressive arguments with my daughter about what I expected. And it was all about what I expected. Yeah. I just didn't articulate in the right way for it to land very well. And it was only when I actually had someone at my workplace who recommended meditation. I'm not really into meditation. I don't really want to do that. And he was like, no, try it. So for me, it was just like, I don't want a relationship like this with my daughter. You know, I don't want this mother-daughter relationship. I wanted a close relationship with my daughter. So I thought, what can I do to create a better relationship? So, you know, meditation, I have to admit, transformed my whole mindset. Didn't change her, it changed me.
Yeah.
It allowed me to actually put aside my values because it didn't matter that she trashed them. and it didn't matter what she thought of them. It allowed me to really get into my daughter's shoes and understand what was going on for her.
Mm.
So then coincided with COVID, where she totally settled. But I still continued with the meditation because of the relationship I really wanted. And my motivation was to change my ways and my way of thinking. And it created a bit of a ripple effect in terms of the change. It also changed my relationship and my behaviour towards my hubby, towards my son, and towards myself.
Yeah. I guess, there's that phrase, isn't there, that we can't change anyone else. The only person we can change is ourselves and how we turn up and our mindset. And that's what you did. You're empowered to do it. And because you were very self aware and have the courage to think outside of the box and not just think, oh, it's all about her, but actually putting your own needs aside and really being present for your daughter, that takes a lot of strength.
Yeah, I think at the time when you're in a collision or a relationship where you're just not agreeing, it's very easy to stay in that space.
Yeah.
Yeah. And not think that you need to work on yourself or it has anything to do with you. Because all you're doing, I think, in that space is you're projecting your anger and your fear onto them. And that's what I was doing to my daughter, which I didn't need to do.
Yeah.
It wasn't needed. And meditation allowed me to give me the space and think about the person that I wanted to be.
Yeah. Okay, well, I think that's actually a really good point for us to stop and pause and use this time now to reflect and think about what advice we would give to our younger self based on what we've been talking about today. So, Z, what advice would you give to your younger self?
Yeah, so I think for me, it's to recognize that we may give birth to these young humans, expecting them to be a carbon copy of us, but they're not. They are individuals, and no child is alike. So be prepared for your children to be very different to each other, because that can be a shock. You cannot shape them or mold them and be like you. And why would you? Meditation really made me realize that life is not about me. Instead, I needed to understand how to walk in my children's shoes and let go of my expectations. And any values they trashed was not going to kill me. I'm still here. She kicked my values and put them in the bin, and I'm still here. It didn't really matter. Instead, it taught me that I just needed to adjust and learn that there are other ways to be. My children were not allowing me to place them in a box. They were creating their own identities, and I was only there to support them. So love is the greatest when we allow children to grow, giving them room to make mistakes. We cannot control them. We can only be their advisors and always remind them that we will always be here. Their decisions will vastly be different to yours, and that's okay. That's the beauty of learning of how different we all are. So be kind to how you think about yourself, how you speak of your children and to your children, and the actions you take. Always apologize when you get things wrong, because we're not perfect. And you, Em?
Okay, so I would say take the good things from your own childhood, and when things work well on reflection for us as a child, then use those things to support your children. But if it didn't, then change things to help you to support your children and make it better for them. And also listen to your own instincts as you know your children, and make new ways of doing things by talking things through and decide important things by consulting with them. But if it's linked to their safety, we as parents have more expertise through life experiences. So use this information that we have to inform those decisions as well. One of the key things that I've learned is all behavior is communication. And so it's not a reflection of us as parents, but what our children are not being able to articulate, or they're not able to let us know what they need through their own words and actions, which can be hurtful, upsetting, or dangerous to us. Good communication is created by creating open, honest relationships and being vulnerable, understanding each other's concerns and points of view, and creating an environment where all topics can be discussed, nothing is off the table, and talking about them without judgments and assumptions. So then that allows trust to be built between everyone. As parents, we sometimes think if our child has a problem that we want to fix it, or we've got the solution, or we can make things better. But this is not what they always want. Sometimes they just need to offload without any comments or advice. And I would ask them, do you want me to just listen, or are you asking me for advice? So then they know that you're really present and listening actively to them and listening to understand their interests and their real needs. And repeat back what you've heard and understood so they can really see that you've listened to them and can clarify anything that they want to. So be curious about them to understand them, and this can help them to figure a way forward by working together. Thanks for listening today. We would love it if you could click the subscribe button, add your comments, and share with as many people as you feel would enjoy our discussions and stories.
We would so love to hear your stories. So email us anonymously or with your first name, any stories about being in the box and getting out of that box. Our email is in the link below.
We can't wait for you to join us next time, where we will be discussing more about parenting teenagers. What happened? Were there more boxes? Join us to find out.
I'm so excited.
We have so much to share with you.